I am going to try to push through the end of the last unit, and we'll see how far we can get in the next unit. We might be able to finish this program a little earlier than we had intended. But last week, in talking about sexuality and Jewish mysticism, we were dealing with Lilith, right? This great mythical demonic female, right? So, you might wonder why God even allows for the possibility of such a demon, right? So one answer to that question is in this text we're going to look at here, okay? So this is going to suggest that Lilith exists as a test. And, if you succumb to temptation, then you fail the test, right? This is sort of akin to the theory about evil in general, which suggests that evil exists as a test for the righteous. It's not a great theory, right? It definitely has its problems. But, there are some things in the universe we just can't explain very easily, which didn't necessarily stop people from trying. So here in this Zoharic text, we're going to see about Lilith, right? The secret of secrets. From the strength of the fierce noon of Isaac, from the wine lees, a naked shoot came forth, comprising together male and female, red like a lily, and they spread out on several sides down several paths. The male is called Samael, and his female is always included with him. Just as on the side of holiness, so on the other side there are male and female, included one with the other. The female of Samael is called Snake, wife of harlotry, the end of all flesh, the end of days. Two evil spirits are attached to one another. The male spirit is fine. The female spirit spreads out down several ways and paths and is attached to the male spirit. So just to explain a couple of things here, Isaac is associated with the Sphira of Gevurah, or Din, judgment, power. So that is, what sort of nourishes the dregs, because judgment will sometimes leave some residue in the realms of holiness. And out of those dregs come Samael. He's a male demon, frequently also referred to as Satan, right? That's Samael. Right? But his female is Lilith, always included with him, right? So they're working as a team, and she's a harlot, but her only purpose is to cause a person to sin so that she can get authority to kill it. So what does she do? Next paragraph. She dresses herself in finery like an abominable harlot and stands at the corners of streets and highways in order to attract men. When a fool approaches her, she embraces him and kisses him and mixes her wine lees with snake poison for him. Once he has drunk, he turns aside after her. When she sees that he has turned aside after her from the way of truth, she takes off all the finery that she had put on for the sake of this fool. The finery she uses to seduce mankind. Her hair is long, red like a lily. Her face is white and pink. 6 pendants hang at her ears. Her bed is made of Egyptian flax. All the ornaments of the East encircle her neck. Her mouth is shaped like a tiny door, beautified with cosmetic. Her tongue is sharp like a sword. Her words smooth as oil. Her lips beautiful, red as a lily, sweetened with all the sweetnesses in the world. She is dressed in purple and attired in 39 items of finery. So, in other words, this woman is like the sexiest creature alive, right? And that sharpened sword of her tongue, that's taken from a Talmudic description of the angel of death, right? So this fool turns aside after her and drinks from the cup of wine and commits harlotry with her, completely enamored of her. What does she do? She leaves him asleep on the bed and ascends to the realms above, accuses him, obtains authority, and descends. The fool wakes up, thinking to sport with her as before, but she takes off her finery and turns into a fierce warrior, facing him in a garment of flaming fire, a vision of dread, terrifying both body and soul, full of horrific eyes, a sharpened sword in his hand with drops of poison suspended and dripping from it. He kills the fool and throws him into Gehenna. Right? So she takes off all her finery, and she's no longer this sexy creature. She's the demon that was in disguise, and she is now empowered to punish the fool for his sin. So the moral of the story is, don't get too incensed. Don't get too excited about sex, right? There are some dangers there, and you can be misled, and don't go there, right? She could be just a test, right? And if you fail the test, you're going to get thrown into Gehenna. Eternal punishment for having had a little bit of a good time, right? So anyway, this is, just one example of the concerns that the mystical tradition has about unbridled sexuality. Okay, the most highly developed people should be able to appreciate physical life and its pleasures, and have them help us to understand God. Right? Interestingly, one of the early Kabbalists, a fellow by the name of Isaac of Akko, said, "A man who does not desire a woman is like a donkey, or even less than one." In other words, from the physical, one may apprehend the worship of God, unquote. So, knowledge of the physical and desire for the sexual is one thing. It just has to be managed properly. Otherwise, you're in big trouble, right? So in the mystical view, sexual union tries to, manage these drives and give them a certain degree of meaning. Yes, Ann?
I was always told that Gehenna lasts a maximum of 1 year. And after that, if you're terribly wicked, the worst that could happen is you just get snuffed out like a candle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you said it was eternal.
Yes, yes. It really just depends on who you talk to. There is one opinion in the tradition that Gehenna only lasts for 12 months for the wicked, right?
That's Akiva's interpretation of where Isaiah says from 1 month to another.
Right. Others, of course, differ about that. And some people didn't approve of all of Rabbi Akiva's teachings. Especially later on in the Zohar, the possibility of Gehenna is much graver than the position Rabbi Akiva took. Now, some of that may have been under the influence of Christian teachings about hell, right? In Christianity, which was, again, making itself felt in 13th century Spain, Gehenna was, hell was eternal. Yes, Lou?
I got about 4 questions or so.
Well, one at a time.
To be expected. So specifically with the text, so the female of Samael, is that Lilith?
Mm-hmm.
And the reference to the snake, is Lilith anywhere portrayed as the serpent in the Adam and Eve story?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And does this particular reference to snake link to that story?
Sure. Maybe not directly, but I think that's the intention.
Okay, a couple of paragraphs later, when she's dressed in purple and attired in 39 items of finery.
Yes.
Quite often when there's a number, there's some reason for that number. Is 39, does that represent anything we should know?
I'm not sure. The number 39 in Judaism is classically associated with the number of forbidden labors on Shabbat, right? But I don't see that as being connected with this. So I just don't know.
Okay, and in the last sentence says he kills the fool, throws him into Gehenna, referring to he as a masculine, but everything else is referred to as feminine.
Yeah, she transforms in this last phase into Samael.
Okay, all right.
Because when you have illicit sex, right? So the female temptation gets transformed into the male warrior who bumps you off.
Thank you.
Yes, Ann.
You're reminding me of the verse. How does it go? The greater the tzaddik, the greater the yetzer hara.
Yes, the greater the man, the greater the yetzer.
And it's referring to sex.
Talmud, and it's part of a story about the great sage Abaye. A very interesting story, but I won't go into it today.
Is that the one with Elijah?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the greater the man, the greater the yetzer, right? So, in other words, the greater the person, the more susceptible he is to temptation. The more careful he therefore must be. Okay?
So it does not mean the greater his sexual drive.
Yes, can mean that. Right? In other words, how does a person become great? Well, in order to become great, you have to have a little bit of ambition. You have to believe that you can accomplish something, right? So that means that you have a significant Yetzer, right? So, people who want to accomplish great things are susceptible to the illusion that they can break certain rules with impunity. Okay?
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay, so that is the end of this particular unit. And now I want to take you into our final unit for this year, at least until we get to part 2 of this class next fall. And this is about what I've referred to before as Prophetic Kabbalah or Ecstatic Kabbalah. Now, mainline Kabbalah, which is what we've been dealing with in recent weeks, is focused on God and on helping God achieve God's purposes. This other form of Kabbalah is really focused on personal experience. In other words, if you have a desire, a strong desire to have an experience of God's presence, right? Then it's not about what God needs. It's about what you need or what you want, right? And how can you get there? Now, we introduced this back at the beginning of the course, right? Really in the first week. This is one of the 5 basic types of Jewish mysticism. Sometimes referred to as prophetic Kabbalah because it helps you to receive a level of divine knowledge, right? Prophecy. And sometimes it's called ecstatic Kabbalah because the goal is to have this ecstatic experience of God's presence. And this form of mysticism is mainly associated with a 13th century Spanish teacher named Abraham Abulafia. Abulafia lived in the same time as the Zohar, and at least one of the people in the circle of the Zohar learned from Abulafia. His system was not widely accepted and certainly not by the authors of the Zohar. His primary impact came much later through the 16th century mystic in Tzfat, Moshe Cordovero, and later on through many of the Hasidic masters. He was to some degree influenced by some of the philosophical work of Maimonides, but he's also drawn to other more mystical works like Sefer Yetzirah, like the teachings of the Hasidei Ashkenaz, the German pietists. And so he developed his own system. He also was very interested in bringing the coming of the Messiah. And there is significant evidence that he believed that he himself might be the Messiah. And at one point, he went to Rome to try to convert the Pope. And he got thrown into prison, but the Pope unexpectedly died. So Abulafia, instead of getting executed, was freed, went on his merry way. Abulafia believed that if you followed certain practices, you could achieve this kind of ecstatic state where you would develop some level of union with God, an ecstatic union with God, right? And this would also help you to reach your peak of spiritual potential. Might also bring you, other useful information, as if you were a prophet.
I'm sorry. Can you, if people aren't speaking, can you mute your
How about if we mute everyone for just a moment?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you could learn all sorts of secrets about the Torah. You could learn God's decrees for the future. You could learn some of the prayers of the angels. You could learn all sorts of useful knowledge, right? And maybe some with a little bit of magic thrown into, that'd be helpful, right? So you would do this through a certain kind of meditational experience, contemplating certain letters of the alphabet, and in particular, the letters of the four-letter name of God, right? So sometimes it's called the path of names, right? It's not the path of Sfirot. It's really not about the Sfirot. Although Abulafia is generally faithful to traditional Jewish ritual, he's really not so much, his system doesn't grow out of that. It's very much an independent thing. So now let's take a look at the text. Okay, so this first text is a little bit about the temple in the minds of the sages and then the mystics, and particularly Abulafia. So here's an excerpt from the Talmud that about a verse in the Torah that says that 3 times a year all your males shall appear before your Lord, the Lord your God, in the place he will choose. And so Yochanan ben Dahavai said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda about this verse, a man who is blind in one eye is exempt from appearing at the temple on the pilgrimage festivals. Why? The verse says, Yir'eh, and it could be read as Yera'eh, yeah? But it could be read as Yir'eh, he will see, right? When you see the letters in the Torah, you could vocalize them both ways. Traditionally, it's vocalized Yera'eh, but it could be Yir'eh, which means he will see. So they derive from this the idea, as he comes to see, so he comes to be seen. Just, God comes to see with both eyes, also he is to be seen with both eyes. In other words, when you went to the temple, you went to have a vision of God. You went to go see God. That was what pilgrimage to Jerusalem was all about. And that's ultimately why you went. It wasn't just to fulfill a mitzvah. It was to have an experience of God's presence. So, and by the way, many people understood the service of the Kohen Gadol to include this kind of thing, to have a vision of God, right? And there are other places where the tradition suggests that ordinary people would have this kind of experience of envisioning God when they went to Jerusalem, right? The rabbis do have a term for this. It's called Gilui Shechina, the revealing of the divine presence. The rabbis didn't usually expect to have that, but some of them did believe that it would happen in the future, just as it had happened in the past. Okay? There are, there are going to be strands in the tradition which support this idea that you can have this kind of intense experience of God's presence, even to the point of envisioning God. I know we were told that Moses was told, you cannot see me and live. Oh, well, maybe they lied to us, who knows? Right? But there was this very strong strand within the tradition that said, yes, you could. If you went to the temple, you could see God. Just like the high priest could see God, even though Moses couldn't see God. But you will. Okay? Now, this next text that I want to show you is quoted in the first Kabbalistic work of Eastern Europe. It's a very personal account of what happens in the experience of a mystic. It's not about what it does for God. That would be like, what the Zohar is about. This is what actually happens to the mystic. So here's the text. A great secret. Great is the power of the prophets, who make the form resemble its former. We have already explained what seems to be the meaning of this secret. That term, by the way, is code language. When it says we've already explained, that means the traditional interpretation of this teaching, right? But I then found a passage from one of the earlier authors on this subject, and my heart urges me to record it, for it offers an explanation. Here's the text of that account. The deeply learned Rabbi Nathan of blessed memory said to me, the complete secret of prophecy to a prophet consists in that suddenly he sees the form of his self standing before him, and he forgets his own self and ignores it. And that form speaks with him and tells him the future. And according to this, our sages said, great is the power of the prophets who make the form appearing to them, resemble its form. And the learned sage, Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra, of blessed memory, said, the one who hears at the time of prophecy is a human being, and the one who speaks is a human being. And another learned man wrote the following, it occurred to me by the power of combination of the letters of the names of God, and by solitary meditation, that I encountered that light which accompanied me, as I have discussed in the book Shaarei Tzedek, book that was written by a student of Abulafia. But to see my own form standing before me, this I was not granted, and this I cannot bring about. Yet another learned man writes, and I, the young one, know and acknowledge with full certainty that I am not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, and I have not the Holy Spirit, and I do not make use of the heavenly voice. These things have not been vouchsafed to me, and I have not taken off my garment or washed my feet. Nevertheless, I call heaven and earth to witness, as the heavens are my witness and my guarantor is on high, that one day I was sitting and writing down a Kabbalistic secret when suddenly I saw the form of myself standing before me, and my own self disappeared from me, and I was forced and compelled to cease writing. Likewise, while we were composing this book and adding the vowel points to the four-letter name, strange objects appeared before our eyes, like the image of red fire at sunset, until we were confused and stopped. And this happened to us several times while we were writing. Okay, so, the midrash on which this is based is very cryptic, right? Great is the power of the prophets who make the form resemble its form. So one way to understand that is that the prophets are really very creative, and that gives them the power to explain God's word, to bring down God's message so as to inspire other people. And it helps the human form to be like God who forms them. It quotes Ibn Ezra's comment. Ibn Ezra, one of the biblical commentators who lived in the 12th century. He said, the one who hears is a human being and the one who speaks is a human being. That could just be a statement that human beings are the vehicle for prophecy, right? But it's interpreted to mean that, one who hears prophecy is still a person, but a very different person than they were before they received prophecy. So the mystical meaning given to the Midrash is prophecy causes the prophet to kind of reform himself in a way that resembles God, or is more like God. So the goal of mystical experience here is that after you reach prophecy, you get a clear vision of your most developed self, the self that you really could become. And you see yourself the way you are today, but also the way you can be in the future. And hopefully it also shows you how to get from here to there. Okay? And we saw that many of the mystics believed in the creation of golems, living beings. But this is like the creation of a soul. Right? So, for most of the mystics, to create a soul was even more impressive than being able to create a golem, just a body without a soul. Okay? So comments or questions up to here?
At one point there, it sounds very much to me like what we would call an out-of-body experience, where you're looking at your image from outside your body. It's just a comment.
Yes, it could be an out-of-body experience. I think the more, I prefer to use the more general term for this, which is paranormal, right? Because that includes a whole batch of things. But yeah, this could very much seem like an out-of-body experience, although it's not clear that the person completely loses their sense of what they are physically, right? It just gets in this higher paranormal consciousness, you get the expanded view not only of what you are, but what you could be.
So the lowercase form, I'm reading it as, correct me if I'm wrong, the lowercase form is ourselves, our bodies, and the former uppercase is God, the one who made us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Okay, other comments or questions? All right. Next, on to Abulafia's own teachings. Right? And some of these excerpts are a little bit longer than pieces that we've looked at before. So I may, kind of skip through some of this. Right? If you are wise and love God with all your heart, reflect on the root from which you were hewn. Know that you have been taken from the throne of glory, endowed with the light of reason, created in God's image. Your coming here has not been purposeless. Return, therefore, for the Holy One of Israel has redeemed you, and his holy name is your glory. So Hearken to these words of mine, bind them upon your neck, write them upon the tablets of your heart, etc., etc. Strive day and night to meditate on the Torah of the Lord, the divine wisdom. Read the prophetic books with understanding, sing the words of the writings, study the sayings of the sages, gaze with divine intelligence into the works of the Kabbalists, which, by the way, I mean, he means a different group of Kabbalists, which is him. And here you will discover that which you seek, and you will see that they all cry out in protest against the absence of wisdom, unworthy deeds, limited understanding. For not a single word contains neither wisdom nor understanding nor knowledge nor word nor deeds in the Torah, the prophets, the writings, and all the words of the rabbis. In other words, everything Jewish, has a special meaning. After you have done this, set your heart to know the glorious and tremendous name of God. Engrave it upon your heart, never to be erased. The sacred names are never to be erased. They point to a picture of God. So how can that be erased? You can't erase God. So never utter the names without concentration, but sanctify them, know them, reflect that they are the angels of all being and the angels of God sent to you in order to raise you higher and higher and elevate you over all the nations of the earth. So, you're gonna do all this preparatory material. You fulfill these prerequisites, right? And then you're ready for this meditative experience that he is going to describe. He called that experience Chokhmat HaTzeruf. Tzeruf refers to the combination of letters, meditation upon the letters of the Aleph Bet, and especially the letters of the four-letter name of God. Right? So you're going to do that in a way so that you detach yourself from material form and join with God. And here's a little of how it works. Now the time has come to elevate you in the stages of love, so that you become beloved on high and delightful here on earth. First, begin by combining the letters of the four-letter name. Gaze at all its combinations. Elevate it. Turn it over like a wheel, which goes round and round, backwards and forwards like a scroll. Do not leave it aside except when you observe that it is becoming too much for you because of the confused movements in your imagination. Leave it for a while and you will be able to return to it later. You can then make your request of it, and when you attain to wisdom, do not forsake it. For the initial letters and the final letters, the numerical values, the abbreviations called notarikons, the combination of letters and their permutations, their accents and the forms they assume, the knowledge of their names and the grasping of their ideas, the changing of many words into one and one into many, all these belong to the authentic tradition of the prophets. By means of these, God will answer when you call upon him, for you belong to his family. And now, my son, the secret of the Lord is with those who fear him, and to them will he make his covenant known. He will make known his covenant to the man who fears heaven and whose covenant is perfect. Right? So, through this mystical practice of letter combination, right, you can meditate and gradually go into this paranormal state through which you have higher consciousness. Right? It's this paranormal state is almost like an auto-hypnotic trance, right? And it can be accompanied by different postures, different breathing exercises, maybe tunes, visualization of colors, specific meditations, which may be spoken or may be thought. And you do want to block out sensory distractions, but the main thing is, by all of this complicated meditation, you send your brain into sensory overload. And that is what brings you to this level of higher consciousness, and through which you bridge into the trance. Okay? Now, we have this all the way back in Merkava mysticism too, but up there, you know, in the Merkava mysticism, there was a lot of worry about, you know, the danger of falling. You know, you're going up to a high level, but the higher you go, the farther you can fall. A lot of dangers associated with the journey, right? Abulafia does not seem to have any concern about that. He thinks, you know, if there are any dangers, he doesn't really dwell on them. It's all about getting to the goal, and it's always, always worth the effort that you put into it, right? Let's take comments and questions here. Yeah, Ann. Ann, you have to unmute yourself.
Do you know anybody who ever tried to do this?
Yes. There are people who try it today. You can look around on the internet for, you know, Jay Michelson is one of the primary people, I think, who has sort of taken after some of this kind of meditation, or at least he did at one time. I don't know if he still does. But there's a lot of stuff on the internet about it.
Do they tell you what they experience?
Some do. Some people would say, well, you know, it's indescribable. You'll know when you get there, right?
What does
Ineffable.
Does Jay Michelson say anything specific?
Don't remember. I think so, but I just don't remember. Other comments or questions? All right, let's go on and to this next text, which, you know, Abulafia likens this process of meditation to playing a stringed instrument. And here's what he says about it. The strings touched with the right hand or the left hand vibrate, and the experience is sweet to the ears. From the ears, the sound travels to the heart, from the heart to the spleen. The joy is renewed through the pleasure of the changing melodies, and it is impossible to renew except the process of combinations of sounds. The combination of letters proceeds similarly. One touches the first string, that is, analogically, the first letter, and the right hand passes to the others, to the second, third, fourth, or fifth strings. And from the fifth, it proceeds to the others. In this process of permutations, new melodies emerge and vibrate to the ears, and then touch the heart. This is how the technique of letter combinations operates. And the secrets which are disclosed in the vibrations rejoice the heart, for the heart then knows its God and experiences additional insight. So, you know, this, you know, it's just, you know, it touches the heart, connects with, you know, this process. You might think of it as a form of dveikut, of cleaving to God, uniting the mystic with God. But the goal is really to provide the mystic this ecstatic experience. And if he has that level of union with God, then he will get to tap into God's wisdom, right? Which is equivalent to experiencing prophecy. There's something likened to artistic creativity as a part of this process. Questions? Yeah, Lou.
Does Abulafia promote the idea that let me ask it this way. If you are able to achieve this state of ecstasy and intense communion with God, what are you supposed to do with it?
Well, you'll learn from it, all right? You'll bring back information, just like a prophet does.
Are you expected to go out into the world and prophesize?
Not necessarily, but you will have information. And maybe you'll also get a message about how and where and with whom to share it. Maybe.
It strikes me, the question I would ask listening to this is, what's next? In other words, after you've talked to God, you've pretty much achieved everything a human can achieve. It's like the person who retires from 2 years as president of the United States when he's, what was Obama, 52? What do you do next? That's just a comment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would guess, I'm sorry?
Nothing. Go on, Rabbi.
I would guess that, if you have this kind of experience, you want more of it. And that's where you would go. It's called an ecstatic experience for a reason.
Good point. It can be repeated.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit later about how one goes about having this experience to begin with. Okay? Other questions or comments? Okay, so let's go on to the next text. And just, brief introduction to this text. There is an aspect of Maimonides' teachings that was very important for Abulafia, and that is the idea of the active intellect or the agent intellect. It's an idea that really comes out of Aristotle. Human intellect has two parts, passive and active. The passive intellect understands the forms of things. The active intellect goes farther, and it turns potential knowledge into actual knowledge. So, so if you see light, right? If you know that there is light somewhere, right? It's one thing to experience it just as light. But it's another thing to have that light turned into colors, right? So that's like, a higher stage, right? Some of the philosophers in this period saw this agent intellect as something that came from outside a person. It was a source of inspiration from God. So if you could be unified with this agent intellect, then you would have prophecy, right? Maimonides said the true reality of prophecy is an overflow from God through the intermediation of the active intellect. And Maimonides also thought that, restoring prophecy would lead to coming of the Messiah. There were different levels of human perfection, and then the highest level was intellectual perfection, and that because the intellect is the part of a person closest to God. But the sages also said that the sage is preferred to the prophet. So there's some intellectual level even above prophecy. Right? So for Abulafia, the next step is that Devekut and prophecy could help create techniques that would lead you to a higher level of experience. Okay? He even identifies the agent intellect with the angel Metatron, because Metatron would provide the mystic information about certain divine names that are not normally known. And this angel is equated not with the Torah on our level, but with the Torah on the higher level, the cosmic level. Okay? So here in this text, Abulafia tells us what it's like to be this kind of mystic, really the perfect mystic. And he says, just as his master, the agent intellect, who is detached from all matter, is called the knowledge, the knower, and the known, all at the same time, since all the three are one in him. So shall he, the exalted man, the master of the exalted name, be called intellect, while he is actually knowing. Then he is also the known, like his master, and then there is no difference between them, except that his master has his supreme rank by his own right, and not derived from other creatures, while he is elevated to his rank by the mediation of the creatures. So in other words, this is a mysticism that's very intellectual, but it really brings you up to union with God. If you're a master of the exalted name, right, then, it's like you can manipulate the names of God. And that's how you get to this level. There is no difference, it says, between the master and the master of the name. So it's not just that the mystic taps into God's knowledge, but there is actually a state of mystical union between God and the person. Okay? So that's really powerful. That's about as powerful a mystical moment as one could have. Okay? So, as someone asked, do you think any of these writers used hallucinogenics? It is possible. I think most of them, and certainly Abulafia, would have seen that as cheating, right? Even if it worked, it would be cheating. Why? Because you can't skip the levels of knowledge and the certain actions that you need to take in order to achieve this level of revelation. So, no, I think, from his perspective, you had to go about it in the proper order. Yeah, Daniel.
I don't know about that, but what it strikes me as are temporal lobe epilepsy seizures, which are pretty well documented and sound very, very similar to these. Now, that does not mean that they are not also touching God or meeting God, but people routinely a medical scientific fact that people involuntarily have these experiences.
Okay. Um,
That's fine. I'm just talking.
no, um, it's, I, I think it's, you know, Abulafia is saying it's a very intense experience and you have to go about it in a certain way. And we're going to see more about this. We won't get to it this week, but we'll talk about that some more. Yeah, Lou.
About 20 some years ago, somebody gave me a series of lectures on cassette tapes about Kabbalah, and there was one section about Abulafia, and I'm not sure if I'm making this connection properly or not, because it's been 20 years since I heard this and listened to it. But there was also and maybe it was in the Abulafia section, about meditating on the flame of a candle. Does that ring a bell with anything to you?
Yeah, that's actually in the Zohar.
Okay. Okay. Is that anything in what we're
Yeah,
going to get into?
And you will see some things like that in Abulafian meditation as well. But it's not, it's not the primary means of getting into that state, right? You'll see it in the Zohar, and you'll see it in certain other Jewish mystics too, as well as non-Jewish mystics, by the way. Candles, the light of a flame, very common mystical technique. You meditate on that, and you meditate on the different colors that you see within the flame. Mm-hmm. And how it seems like, there are different levels. And that would also lead you to a paranormal experience. Right? It's not particularly prominent in Abulafia, although, as you'll see next time, what he really, he does use a lot of light. He would love for you to fill your house with candles and lamps and so forth. But that's just, supplementary. It's not really the main event. That, at least, is my understanding of it. Other questions or comments? Yes, Anne.
In an out-of-body experience, it's really quite mundane. You simply see your body where it is, and eventually you realize that what the body would have seen is not what you're seeing. You're seeing the whole thing from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm. And you are telling us
very ordinary
personal experience?
What did you say?
You're telling us this from personal experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just totally ordinary. It's nothing spiritual or whatever about it.
Well,
you can have, I mean, it only happened once, but I can tell you, you could have an out-of-body experience without any spirituality, whatever.
Yeah. So Nick, I see your comment on this. Generally speaking, this kind of mystical experience is not mundane. It is. It can be overwhelming, and Abulafia would say that's probably a good thing. It means that it's working. Whatever got you there, you'll know that it can get you there again if you want to go there. but you may not want to go back if it's that scary, right? You just, you know, you have to want to get there ultimately, right? Other questions or comments? All right, we will conclude our discussions, at least for the summer, next week. Same time, noon next week.
Rabbi,
You all.
Rabbi, before you leave,
Yes.
I want to make sure I understood what you just said, and I tried to capture you on the previous class and missed. Are both of your Sunday morning classes now finished?
No, this class will have one more session next week. The
Okay.
Pirkei Avot class is over.
Okay, but then next week is your last class for this summer.
Next week is the last class for now. And then we'll start part 2 beginning after the holidays.
Okay.
Oh, way after, not anytime near this, not in
Well,
August or
it won't be
September.
way after the holidays, but it'll be way away from now.
It'll be way away from August.
We got to give you a few months to get ready for the holidays, because nobody knows what the holidays are going to be like this year, and to absorb all these teachings and try out whatever you want. And
I didn't get a chance to thank you in the earlier Pirkei Avot class, but thank you very much for your
all right.
teaching. And I
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank
Y'all
you,
have a
Rabbi.
good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.